Have you ever really stopped to think about what it takes to be a professor or a researcher at an Indian university these days? We're going to go way beyond just a simple syllabus breakdown here. We're actually going to uncover a fascinating blueprint, a detailed plan that really defines the ideal modern academic. So let's just ask that question right out of the gate. What does it really take? What are the core skills, the essential knowledge, and the fundamental mindset you need? Because, it's so much more than just being an expert in one subject. And the answer, believe it or not, is pretty much laid out for us in this document. We're looking at the syllabus for the UGC NET Paper 1. Now, I want you to think of this less as a test and way more as a national blueprint for what a complete academic should be. All right, let's dive in and see what's inside. So, this blueprint, it kicks off with two fundamental pillars. These things form the absolute foundation of an academic's identity, the art of teaching and the science of research. These are the two main jobs that everything else is built on.
Okay, first up, teaching. And we're not just talking about standing up at a podium and giving a lecture. No, the modern expectation is for a much more dynamic, responsive, and really a deeply skilled approach to education. And this right here highlights a huge philosophical shift in modern education. It's this move away from the old school teacher-centered model to a learner-centered one. So the big question is no longer, how am I teaching? But instead, how are my students learning? How are they engaging? And how are they growing? It's a total flip. And that learning can happen pretty much anywhere. An effective academic today needs to be kind of bilingual in their methods, right? They have to be fluent in traditional face-to-face instruction, but also just as comfortable using powerful Indian government platforms like SWAYAM, and of course global MOOCs, those massive open online courses. Of course, teaching means you have to assess learning, and that's evolving too. Take the choice-based credit system, for example. This is all about giving students more flexibility to pick courses across different departments. That, plus innovations like computer-based testing, just shows this big push towards measuring learning in a more personalized and modern way.
All right, let's switch gears to the second pillar, and you'll see how this all connects. Beyond just sharing knowledge, an academic is expected to create new knowledge, and that's the science of research. It's a systematic, rigorous, and totally ethical pursuit of new insights.
And this process shows that research isn't some big mystery, it's a structured journey. You start with a question, you see what everyone else has said about it, you form a guess, a hypothesis, then you design your whole approach, and you just systematically work your way towards a conclusion. It's a logical flow. But within that one path, there's a ton of diversity. A researcher needs to get the difference between different methods, like quantitative, which is all about numbers and stats, versus qualitative, which is more about non-numerical stuff, like interviews. And tying all of this together is the absolute need to use technology well, and, most importantly, stick to strict ethical guidelines.
Okay, so if teaching and research are the main jobs, what powers them? Well, that brings us to the next layer of our blueprint, the essential toolkit of cognitive skills. Basically, how to think, how to argue, and how to communicate like a pro. This is really the engine room. I mean, without the ability to think critically, reason logically, and share your ideas clearly, even the most brilliant research or teaching plan is just going to fall flat. These are the universal skills you have to have.
A huge part of this toolkit is mastering logical reasoning. So that means understanding deductive reasoning, which is kind of top-down, right? You go from a general rule, like all birds have feathers, to a specific conclusion. And it also means knowing inductive reasoning, which is bottom-up, building a theory from specific things you've observed. You need both to build solid academic arguments.
And what's really fascinating is that this framework also emphasizes a rich tradition from the Indian school of logic, the Pramanas, or the means of valid knowledge. This whole system is about exploring how we know what we know. For instance, pratyaksha is knowledge from direct perception, like seeing something with your own two eyes. Anumana is knowledge from inference. You see smoke, and you infer there's a fire. It's a really structured way of thinking about where our knowledge comes from. And in the world we live in today, which is just overflowing with data, another absolutely crucial skill is interpretation. An academic has to be able to look at a bar chart like this one, or a pie chart, or a table, and not just see a bunch of numbers, but actually understand the story the data is trying to tell. This is a non-negotiable part of the toolkit.
Now for the final layer of our blueprint,
Look, it's not enough to be a brilliant teacher and researcher just locked away in a vacuum. A truly modern academic has to be deeply connected to the world that exists beyond their classroom and their lab. So, the key word here is context. Understanding the technological, environmental, and systemic forces that are shaping our society, well, that's what makes your work relevant and impactful. It's essential. And that starts with digital literacy. An academic needs a baseline fluency in ICT, that's information and communication technology. This isn't just about knowing how to use email and video conferencing. It's also about understanding the bigger digital initiatives that are transforming how universities and even governments operate. That awareness has to extend to our planet too. This standard of knowledge demands an understanding of major environmental issues. We're talking about big global efforts, like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, which cover everything from clean energy to reducing inequality, and landmark climate agreements. This is now considered a core competency, not an optional extra. And finally, an academic has to understand their own professional world. That means knowing the history of higher learning in India, from its ancient roots through its massive expansion after independence, and understanding the policies and governance structures that are in place today. And there it is, the complete blueprint. It's a multi-layered, it's demanding, and it's an incredibly dynamic vision of what it means to be an academic today. You've got to be a teacher, a researcher, a critical thinker, and an engaged global citizen, all rolled into one. So this meticulously detailed plan defines the ideal academic for right now, for our current era. But it leaves us with a really fascinating final thought, doesn't it? As technology and society just keep accelerating, what new skills and new competencies will the blueprint for tomorrow demand?